Kids in care are labelled and they're judged. I know this because I've seen it. I lived it. I seen it last year when I was in a church hall surrounded by 300 people protesting the build of a children's home. This is what those people had to say. This meeting took me right back to how I felt when I was in care. I felt judged and I felt really scared. But I had to speak out because this was about much more than just a building in a community. This was about 5 children, through no fault of their own, couldn't live with their families. So I bravely spoke out and my voice was shaking by nerves. It was horrible. But I had to own a part of my identity that I've never owned for a long, long time, that I too had been in care. But those people didn't want to listen. Those are the people that continue to judge us and want us to be silenced. That's why it's so important that I tell you today some amazing stories about care-experienced people, because these people are magic, and I'm going to show you how. The first photograph is of Ashley Cameron. She's a campaigner that helped change the law in Scotland. She was in care. The next one is of Fatima Whitbread, a former Olympian, former world champion javelin thrower. She was in care too. And the last one is of Harry O'Neill, who just graduated in nursing from university. He was in care too. But we're the lucky ones. In fact, we're more likely to go to prison than university. 50% of us leave with a mental health issue, and we're 20 times more likely to die by the time we get to 25. Can you imagine if that was your child? Here's a radical thought. These are your children, and they're crying out for your help. I went into care because my mum couldn't cope after my abusive stepdad left, and it wasn't my fault. 90% of us go into care because of abuse or neglect. It wasn't our fault. But the care system made me feel like it was my fault because everything I did was written down and analysed. Even my friends had to be police checked. So I rebelled at every opportunity. I even ran away down to London twice. And I remember when I was on this train on my way down to London, my friend David said, "Laura, you've been in a bad mood all holiday." I said, "David, we're not on holiday, we've ran away." But David was right. I was miserable. I desperately missed my family, especially my brother and sister. So much so that I remember when my little sister, I had a visit with her, we decided to handcuff each other together. We had to get taken down to the fire station and sewn apart. We got in a lot of trouble for that one. But I missed her that much. I remember at 14 living in a children's home, having frequent visits back and forward to my mum. But after each and every visit, I felt rejected because my mum couldn't cope. I remember after one visit, I went back to the children's home I was in, and I was met by a wonderful woman called Wendy. Wendy sat me down and she said, "Laura, it's not your fault that your mum can't cope." But I didn't believe her. So I took myself up to my bedroom and I got the sharpest thing I could find and I cut into my arms. It was the only way that I knew how to cope. A while later, Wendy came up the stairs to my bedroom. She sat down beside me and she said, "Laura, why did you do that?" But I couldn't speak. Wendy held my hand and she said, "Laura, I know. All you want is to be loved." And I fell apart in that woman's arms and she cuddled me in like I was her own child. And I kept looking up at her because she had this struggle in her eyes. I didn't know what that was at the time, but I know now. Wendy was an employee. She was a worker. She wasn't allowed to tell me that she loved me. So not long after that, my behaviour got worse and worse, so much so I didn't want to be here anymore. So I took a serious attempt on my life, and that landed me locked up in a secure unit for my own safety. Because nobody could see that the wee girl underneath, the big ball of rage, all they could see was labels, mental, damaged. They couldn't see me. I just needed love. I left the care system with this. This is not a memory box full of photographs. certificates, fluffy teddy bears. No, this is a box of case files, opinions and notes. And it talks about 10 houses that looked after me, 10 families that kicked me out. 10 isn't even a big number. I know some kids that have had 50 homes. And the result of leaving care with just a box of files is this. At 18 years old, I was living in a flat on my own, using sleeping pills just to sleep my life away. But I'll never forget the neighbour that used to come and check on me, and the neighbour that got me help when I needed it. So I bet you're wondering, how on earth did these people make it out alive and well, if that's what they leave care with? I'll tell you. It's people like Mary in the first photograph with Ashley. Mary was a professional, an advocate, but their relationship was allowed to develop and grow. Ashley now calls Mary Mum. The second one is me and my husband, who sat me down one day and said, Laura, I promise I'll never leave you and I'll always love you. The third photograph is of Fatima and her mum, Margaret, who came into her life as a sports coach, who believed in her and gave her hope. And at 14 years old, Fatima had finally found her way home because she was adopted by that family. The care system is supposed to provide a substitute for family life, but love is not part of the deal. Can you imagine living in a system? Children's homes look more like institutions, and foster carers don't need to love the children they care for. Imagine living in a world where you don't call your parent mum or dad, you call them staff. Can you imagine having to sign your pocket money out in a formal form, or going down to the beach, but you're not allowed to go in the water because there's not a first aider on duty? How would that make you feel? I can tell you how it made me feel. I felt isolated and alone in a system that controlled more than it cared, and I was angry. So angry that I had to go back into that care system as a worker. But the minute I step into that system as a worker, I'm told to never share that I too had been in care. And I did what I was told because I was scared, and I let fear win. But let me ask you, do you think the suffragettes let fear win when they were campaigning for the women's right to vote? Or do you think Rosa Parks, when she campaigned for civil rights, let fear win? Or do you think the people in the LGBT movement let fear win? Fear doesn't have to win. These are the people that stood their ground because they believed in equality. That's all we want, is an equal chance at life. The care system is costing us billions. For what? For that? That is why we need this revolution. We need to own our identity and stop apologising for who we are. We need to innovate, take a risk, because you might just save a life. And we need communities to own us and not judge us anymore. And we need people like Wendy to love people like me. I want you to be part of this revolution. So go out there and do something and make care incredible for every young person out there, every child, because they need love. Thank you.
Laura, come here. Standing ovation. Hold on. Milk it.
Thank you.
That was lovely stuff, really touching, and thank you so much for sharing that, Laura. Really, really, just great.